Please use the questions section of your webinar interface to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation. That will help facilitate a productive question and answer session after we hear from our presenters and respondents. If you have any technical problems during the call, please contact Sean Holohan or Michelle Santiago, whose contact information I sent you about half an hour ago. And now, Sarita Brown, President of Excelencia in Education, will open our program.
Thank you, David. Welcome. Excelencia in Education's mission is accelerating Latino student success in higher education. We pursue our work with intentionality, recognizing that increasing the numbers of Latino graduates expands this country's talent base in all sectors. To highlight the direct link between the outcomes of effective colleges and universities and the needs and opportunities for employers, we launched the Finding Your Workforce series to analyze the data, examine the practices of institutions, and engage the public about Latino graduates in multiple disciplines. Today, we focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, referred often to as STEM, a set of disciplines critical to our country's economy. This brief, Finding Your Workforce, Latinos in STEM, is being released in concert with this webinar and with support from the Microsoft Corporation. Excelencia in Education thanks our business colleagues. The analytical strategy was designed by our co-founder, Deborah Santiago, and the brief was produced by Excelencia's research team under her direction. It is now my pleasure to turn things over to Deborah and dig into today's brief.
Thank you, Sarita. I want to get started by sharing a little bit about the goals we had for putting together Finding Your Workforce, Latinos in STEM. And that is, in part, to increase awareness that more Latinos are graduating in STEM and areas of national need for our country. We need to be paying attention to that success. Second, we want to highlight the institutions and what they're doing to try and increase the numbers of Latinos and other students who are graduating in these important fields. We want to encourage those who are in the workforce and institutions who are educating students in STEM to really engage and find new strategies and approaches to engage the Latino community. And we want to respond to those who really are interested and have told us they're interested in recruiting more Latinos, but have said they don't know where to look. And for us, this is a piece that says, you know, no excuses. If you want to know where Latinos are graduating from, then this is something to take a look at. If you need to know where they are, it's not necessarily in the same 15, 20 institutions that employers necessarily recruit from or graduate schools recruit from. This is where Latinos are, and it's an important conversation to have if we're going to be more inclusive of Latinos in the population. I also want to note that there's a companion piece to this that we released earlier this year, focused on Latinos in the health fields, given the importance of those occupations in our professional setting as well. So why Latinos in STEM? I think most of you are on this call already know, but I think it's always good to be overt about that. We've got wonderful research and studies that tell us we need 1 million more STEM professionals than are currently projected to have. That's about 30% more degrees overall. We also know that Latinos are going to account for about 75% of the labor market growth overall. And for us, this is a perfect link between the population and labor force growth, the needs we have in STEM, and the ability to educate more Latinos to fill those positions of national need for us as a country. I also want to let you know that all of the data that we are sharing with you today are from public sources. We used the Bureau of Labor Statistics, National Science Foundation, the National Center for Education Statistics as our core sources, Digest of Education Statistics, and a big one for us is the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, IPEDS, looking at completion numbers. And to do this, my research team and I, we had to put together 100 zip codes, which is the acronym for these disciplines within institutions, to be able to aggregate STEM. We have the data separated by science, technology, engineering, and math. but given the conversations in STEM, we decided to aggregate them. I just want to recognize that hopefully my colleagues who are also on the call, Morgan Taylor and Emily Calderon Galeano, were critical in making sure that we got this publication made it available to all of you. So if nothing else, here are the key points, the key takeaways that we have in the publication. I hope you'll read at the end of this session. Latinos earned a small percentage of all credentials conferred in STEM, about 9% in 2012-13. And we do focus on a given year. For us, we wanted to look explicitly at our progress in degree completion. So you're not seeing rates here, you're seeing absolute numbers, and it's tied to institutions because we know that looking at institutions where students are graduating is absolutely important. So we've seen a progress. It was 8% 4 years ago, but we're still 9% of those earning credentials and degrees. We're also very concentrated in our degree completion. So in our analysis, we're going to show you a bit about 2% of institutions graduated, about a third of Latinos earning degrees in STEM. It's highly concentrated by institution, also by geography. California, Florida, Texas, those 3 states, and Puerto Rico represent the vast majority of where the institutions are that are graduating Latinos in STEM. We also tend to be concentrated at the baccalaureate level. So about half of all Latinos earning degrees in STEM are getting them at the baccalaureate level. That's not a surprise. It's very consistent with other groups, racial and ethnic groups. But we noticed that Latinos, in terms of representation, are more likely to be at the certificate level than at the graduate level. The last 2 points that are key takeaways is that it's more likely to be public institutions and Hispanic serving institutions where Latinos are graduating from in STEM fields. And the last part is that, while Latinos are getting degrees in STEM, and it's absolutely important, we just took a look at the workforce and found that Latinos tend to be concentrated in lower paying jobs, more in the service area than in the professional area. And that provides opportunities to look at ideas like scaffolding and also recruiting students who have invested and been successful at lower academic levels to make sure that they continue in the STEM pipeline and pathway to get degrees and enter the workforce. So just some very quick graphics for you to take a look at. Again, looking at 2012-2013, half of all degrees for Latinos in STEM came at the baccalaureate level, 22% at the associate, 18% at certificate, and 10% at the graduate level. We want to take a look at representation. When you look at this, this is all who earned a degree in 2012-13 and Latinos. This is where I was mentioning we tend to be higher represented at the certificate level than 18% of all who got certificates in STEM were Latino, compared to doctoral level, where of all who got doctoral degrees in STEM, we represented 3% of those who got degrees in the STEM field. So you see the opportunity here from 18% to 3%. We see a decrease in representation of Latinos as we go up the academic level. In terms of credentials overall, this is where we wanted to point out they've made progress. Excelencia first started this analysis in 2009-10, or with data from 2009-10. In those 4 years, we have seen increase in the numbers of credentials Latinos have earned in STEM fields. And these numbers are in the thousands. So from 4,000 getting certificates in 2009-10 to 10,000 in 2012-13. So we have at every academic level seen an increase in the numbers of Latinos earning degrees in STEM, which shows the progress that we're making overall and how critical that is for workforce and graduate education. But we are highly concentrated. And as I pointed out earlier, 2% of all institutions in the country awarded about a third, 33% of credentials to Latinos in STEM. So we have a real concentration of not just enrollment, but completion in this field that we should be paying attention to. We also want to focus, I'd mentioned Hispanic Serving Institutions, HSIs. We took a look at the data based on this. In Excelencia, we annually create a list of institutions that meet the basic criteria for an HSI. In 2012-13, they were about 11% of institutions and enrolled about 59% of Latino undergraduates. Just for your information, we've updated that in 2013-14 data, but this is to be consistent with the completions. We took a look at these same numbers. Now what we see is that HSIs were the majority of the top 25 institutions awarding degrees to Latinos at the certificate and associate and the baccalaureate level. 15 of 25, 14 of 25. But at the master's and doctoral level, the graduate level, they were much less likely to be represented. And then when we took a look at the degrees awarded, HSIs in total for the top 25 and overall awarded almost half of all certificates and associate degrees that were earned by Hispanics in STEM were awarded at HSIs. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but I wanted to at least give a representation. It's available in the publication. We recognize the top institution awarding degrees to Latinos in STEM. I would note that these are merely listings. The top 25 are merely based on the numbers of Latinos earning degrees. What we put together in top 25 do not speak to the quality or the completion rates, the graduation rates of Latinos in these fields. This top 25 is predicated on the numbers of Latinos earning degrees in STEM in a given year. So we have at the certificate level, at the associate, baccalaureate, master's, and doctoral level. As you see, we had shared here, the majority are located in California, Texas, and Florida, and then Puerto Rico as well. So a couple of exceptions, but that's mainly where we see them. I hope you'll follow up with these. We have some examples of what some institutions are doing to really increase Latino college completion in the STEM fields. So workforce, I wanted to bring a little bit of a focus on this because we're going to share a little bit more about the institutions, but in the workforce, when we took a look at the data, we noticed that Latinos were highly concentrated in STEM professions that were at the service level as opposed to the professional level in STEM. And this means those that are in electrical technicians and assemblers, that's where you see the higher Latino representation in STEM professions, not so much in engineers and engineering or other science fields that are considered professional in the workforce. That has implications when we take a look at the salaries that Latinos who are in STEM are making. And we point out, again, this is cross-referenced with Department of Labor information, that those in the professional field can be making over $120,000 near a couple of the professions here, engineering managers, computer information systems managers, as opposed to service occupations where we have a much higher concentration of Latinos in the STEM fields. And the income there is about $40,000 to $75,000. Higher than we find in other areas, certainly in health, where we see the majority of Latinos also in the service field, and in some cases higher than the national median salaries, but still lower than one could expect overall in the STEM workforce. We took another look specifically at Latinas in STEM and found a couple of interesting points that we wanted to bring to your attention. And that is, while we see about a third of Latinas, Latina freshmen who are first-time, full-time students interested in STEM fields, they end up having they represent about 3% of all degrees earned in STEM. And while they earn about 60% of all bachelor's degrees to Latinos, about 37% of all STEM bachelor's degrees were earned by Latinas overall. And that's important. And then we also took a look at the workforce component, and about 13%, that's where you see Latinas in STEM as part of the workforce in science and engineering occupations. Last 2 points I wanted to make before I hand it over to my colleagues to respond. And I'm sorry I'm going through this quickly. There's just a lot of good information here, and I'm hoping I'm hitting high points for your consideration. We took a look at what are institutions doing to graduate Latinos, and what more could they and employers and others do. And so 2 quick points here. One is to focus on the STEM pathway. And as I hope you see in the data on completion, this is not about just recruiting Latinos at the baccalaureate level. There are lots of, we see many Latinos at the certificate and associate level who are completing that could continue in a pathway, and making sure that we've got kind of diversification, multiplication of multiple entry points, I think creates the opportunity to have a broader section of society engaged in STEM. So for example, community colleges enroll many Latinos who are in STEM. Finding ways to recruit at that level, whether it's to go on to baccalaureate education or the workforce, is important. And then creating scaffolding, and whether it's outreach, partnerships, advising, mentorship. We look at the Latinos with the Latino lens and the entire STEM pathway to see how we can bring more on board and make sure they're part of our educated citizenry and workforce. And then I'll just say that we at Excelencia have examples of Excelencia, which is a program we've put together highlighting evidence-based strategies that are working for Latinos. And it just extracted a couple of them in the publication here, between college readiness, outreach, academic support, and retention and completion. Things with, these are programs with evidence of effectiveness of working for Latinos in STEM fields. And I hope you'll take a look at the programs we have in our Growing At Works database that captures a success by institutions working with Latinos in the STEM fields. Sarita, if I could hand it back to you.
Thank you, Deborah. Before I introduce our panel, I would like to remind everyone on the webinar to look at the interface and prepare to submit questions in writing. Deborah's comments and the research hopefully have triggered your ideas and questions, and we would like to start generating those so that we can use our time wisely at the end. As we begin this public discussion about Latinos in STEM, we are most delighted to have 4 national experts whose work puts them at the intersection of degree production, Latino talent, and America's workforce in STEM. I will introduce all of them and then in turn turn things to each of the panelists. Horacio Gutierrez is Corporate Vice President and Deputy General Counsel of Microsoft. Antonio Tijerino is President and CEO of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, and under his leadership has invested in Latino talent, particularly young people and college students. Dr. Gabriel Montaño is a research scientist at Los Alamos National Laboratory and President of the Society for Chicanos and Native Americans in Science, SACNAS. And Andres Enriquez is former program officer at the National Science Foundation and the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and a current board member of Excelencia in Education. With that as our panel, we will turn things over first to Horacio Gutierrez.
Thank you, Sarita. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar and to mark the occasion of the release of your important report, Finding Your Workforce, Latinos in STEM, as it highlights critical gaps in Latino participation in the STEM field. Let me start by saying that at Microsoft, we are painfully aware of the underrepresentation of Latinos and Latinas in the STEM field. While it is promising, as the report shows, that the number of Latinos earning STEM credentials has significantly increased since 2010, the report also makes it clear that more needs to be done for Latinos to earn a higher proportion of total STEM degrees and be equipped for the higher wage jobs of the 21st century. Furthermore, the report conveys, and Microsoft agrees, that STEM fields need to be more inclusive of Latinas earning STEM credentials. As was noted before, the report shows that even though Latinas earn 60% of all bachelor's degrees awarded to Latinos, they only earn 37% of Latino awarded STEM degrees. So our country faces the paradox of unemployment, while at the same time companies like Microsoft and other technology companies cannot fill the jobs they have to offer. There is clearly a mismatch between education and opportunity, between supply and demand that we must solve. One of the biggest challenges in growing the representation of Latino students in the technology fields is the lack of awareness of technology careers. And for example, of the fact that there will be a need of 1.8 million technology jobs by 2018 in the United States alone. Microsoft itself currently has thousands of open job opportunities for computer scientists and engineers, but find it increasingly hard to fill the jobs with local talent, let alone talent from underrepresented minorities. For our nation to maintain our position as the global leader in innovation and technology, it is crucial that our technology industry reflect the full diversity of America. We have a great opportunity as a country to leap forward and make the kinds of changes that will create the foundation for the next wave of technology innovation, and for Latinos and Latinas to be full participants in and beneficiaries of the opportunities that it will create. But much has to be done, and cooperation between the public sector and the private sector industry is going to be critical. Microsoft wants to do its part. It is working to do its part, and putting this report out and having these facts come to light and start a discussion is certainly a great beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Horacio. Again, I'd like to remind everyone on the webinar to submit your questions using the webinar interface. Now it's my privilege to introduce Antonio Tijerino and hear what his organization is doing.
Sarita, thank you, and great work. You and Deborah and the team over there have been doing this for many years, and I believe you guys have been ahead of the curve. I know I've certainly been aware of your great impact in terms of making sure that everybody is on the same page with these issues, and it allows the programmatic people, the things that we're doing, to do a better job and a more informed job. I echo what Horacio was saying in terms of the great need. Sometimes for me, it doesn't quite add up. When you have what he said, 1.8 million jobs that'll be needed by 2020, which is only 5 years away, and at the same time, currently, I think we have only 400,000 computer science majors in college right now at this moment, and then 90% of schools don't teach computer coding, before you go to college in terms of high schools. A lot of that doesn't add up to me, and you also have 10,000 baby boomers turning retirement age every single day over the next 18 years, and many of them in the STEM fields. So we have to fill that gap. I think that it's important to get very creative with all of this. If Latinos are over-indexing playing video games and using phone apps, we developed a program where we have a challenge where we're challenging them to develop a phone app or a video game that addresses social issues, because we believe that this is a great gateway on their terms to engage them on STEM potential careers. And then as you unfold the program, you introduce them to what cybersecurity is, and it's not that big of a leap, or a career in computer coding isn't that big of a leap from playing a video game or playing with your phone app to developing one to having a career. And then there are other things, like our Code as a Second Language program was actually created specifically to fill that gap that 90% of schools aren't teaching coding. And we teach them in middle school, high school, mostly, but now we're even getting into the K through 6 to at least make that introduction and have that follow-up go forward. We are now, as of this summer, focusing on the consulates, Mexican and Salvadoran consulates, through a partnership with Saberes Poder and the consulates to teach computer coding. And it's an 8-week course. It's a real thing with certifications and everything, and engagement of employee resource groups to immigrants as they're coming into the country. It's important that America uses up all the resources we have here, because the H-1B visa, they get used up within 1 week. Take all 65,000, we're gone. So what happens the other 51 weeks? And I think it's important also that we stop this conversation from we can't find them to they don't exist. And that third one is the part we're all trying to stop, that we aren't capable. And to demonstrate how capable we are, We recently went to Silicon Valley, where we understood that we couldn't find Latino programmers. So it wasn't even that hard. We had 500, and 40% of them were female. We didn't even have any budget. We just wanted to prove that we are not unicorns, brown unicorns walking around with a keyboard. And I think we've been able to prove that there is a core that we can work from and high achieving. But we have to be able to leverage that core to reach out to others. So for the code as a second language, we actually have within our network, the young people within our network are the ones who are teaching those classes all over the country. And again, leveraging what we have to get more and then be able to move forward, because this is all about a value proposition to America, and I've always believed that the Latino community presents a value proposition, and it's shifting our very flexible and noble workforce from fighting wars and building buildings and putting food on your table to another area where America needs us, and that's in the STEM fields or in the technology fields. And we're always up to do that in terms of giving America what it needs in terms of the workforce, and we'll certainly do that. But we all need to work together, the corporate folks along with the nonprofit world and the public sector. I think it gets overcomplicated, and I think it really needs to be streamlined. We need to do an inventory of what everyone's doing, getting everyone on the same page, and then making a measurable impact. I know it sounds crazy that I stopped talking, but that was what I was going to say, Sarita.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure to have you go over the very real, direct connections between Latino talent, young people, and the need of our workplace. As we consider our own reactions to individual panelists and to the data itself, questions are coming in, and we're gratified by that. Please do start sharing them with us so that we can use our time at the end well and get to you. And should we run out of time, by all means, the dialogue will continue even when the hour ends. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Montaño, whose day job is at Los Alamos National Lab and whose vocation as a leader in higher education is president of SACNAS. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you, Sarita. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation to join and participate in this webinar. As a brief background, I'll give a description of SACNAS. SACNAS is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science. We are organizing an organization devoted to advancing underrepresented minorities, particularly of Hispanic and Native American ethnicities, toward obtaining advanced degrees and positions of leadership within STEM. We do so through rigorous programming efforts focused on helping our members develop the necessary skills to become successful in STEM professions, beginning at the undergraduate level through, for example, introduction to scientific presentations through advanced careers such as our Summer Advanced Leadership Institute, which focuses on helping our current and future leaders develop job advancement and networking skills. We have an extensive network of over 20,000 individuals and have student chapters at over 100 institutions across the country. Serving in my capacity as president of SACNAS, I was honored to be asked to participate in this webinar and review the recent report by Excelencia in Education. This report is very important. It's a data-driven analysis that provides context for the still existing discrepancy and diversification of the STEM workforce. In particular, the success of a small number of institutions is primarily responsible for the vast majority of STEM degree recipients. I believe this data can be taken one of two ways. It hints at a systemic problem in our country of a lack of a concern by the vast majority of advanced degree institutions to invest in outreach to our country's largest growing demographic, but also it provides the potential for a solution through translatable initiatives. In other words, if a few places have figured it out, so can the rest of us. Another important viewpoint of the report is that there is a skew in types of degrees being obtained with certificates and associate level degrees, greatly outnumbering higher level and higher education degrees. The large concern here, as was mentioned previously, is that This hints at that current programming initiatives from a policy and legislative level are resulting in a pseudo-diversification of the STEM workforce. In other words, diversification in STEM is at the entry level, technical positions with individuals lacking their credentials to advance to positions of leadership. This is also not what is needed in terms of true diversification of STEM and must be addressed. And lastly, I'll just say that the data indicates that a small number of research-intensive and in many cases, or in some cases, private institutions are responsible for the highest number of Latino PhDs. While they should be applauded for their efforts, it causes pause to consider whether or not the students succeeding represent the average Latino student or are a result of the anomalies, such as the non-first generation and affluent Latino. This would make for an interesting study because it would have a dramatic effect on whether or not translatable models exist at these institutions and in these initiatives. And I want to summarize by saying that this is a matter of intellectual capital within this country. By 2050, without change, over 60% of all PhDs in STEM in the U.S. will go to foreign nationals. And if we want to maintain our status as the intellectual leaders of the world, this is something that needs to be addressed. And the nice thing about this report is that these are objectives and objectable facts, and discussion must be framed as such. These are not subjective feel-good initiatives, but a necessary things that are facing our country in the coming decades. And so I applaud Excelencia in Education for their thoughtful and data-driven analysis. It provides a necessary context to frame an objective conversation that cannot be minimized as a passionate plea, and instead brings serious scientific rigor to an important issue that we must all work synergistically together to solve.
Thank you, Gabriel. Our final panelist is Andres Enriquez. I'll turn things over to you, Andres.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Sarita. I think this is just a terrific, the Finding Your Workforce Latinos in STEM is a critical and it's a timely analysis of the trajectory for Latinos being prepared for STEM and STEM careers. So as the report points out, there's a steady improvement in the number of Latinos interested in STEM. And the report also discusses, some of the excellent examples of the STEM college readiness programs that we have in both in middle and high school, but that sort of pipeline that we see in K through 12 in order to get them through to post-secondary education, and some post-secondary institutions that also provide, strong academic support that have been greatly successful with Latino students. And these are really critically important to ensure that the examples that the Finding Your Workforce report points out really are really critical to understand how we both support and get kids, young people, ready for this. And this is really important because, as we heard from the CDC this morning, our nation's demographic continues to shift, and as STEM skills and the mindset, this sort of STEM mindset that continues to be embraced by employers. So there are a number of critical things that we should be aware of that this report underscores, but I would like to also riff a little bit. One is communication, and I think this is the report is a really good start at this. We need to better explain to parents and young people not just the skill set of STEM, but to clearly describe what some of these jobs are. As a country, we know what doctors do, we know what teachers do, we know what lawyers are, and we actually probably know, many of us know them, and they're our next door neighbors, and we see them on the street. But for our community, they're less familiar with what the scientist does and what the STEM gets you. So this report starts at that conversation, and I hope we can do more of that. It needs to be much more crystallized. Secondly, there's an issue of fixing the leaky pipeline, so this report points out that there are a number of college-ready programs and really excellent post-secondary institutions that have been graduating a lot more students. And we see that there are a whole lot more Latino students getting certificates. But along the way, even between K-12 and post-secondary, we are losing young people. We've done better, but we're still losing a lot of young people. And how do we fix that leaky pipeline? And maybe one of the things that the report points out is there are a number of businesses that work closely mentoring students and giving them the kinds of experiences that can really improve their understanding of what the daily routine and life of a STEM professional does. Certainly, there's issues around state and federal policies. So it's critical that state and federal policies be developed that could both promote and replicate some of the programs that Finding Your Workforce has. And it also needs the kind of monetary support that are looking at similar Latino-focused STEM programs that could provide the kind of workforce and the diversity that we need in our workforce, because there's been that disconnect. So we see that these things are happening, but as Deborah pointed out excellently in her presentation, some of these folks are going to the same institutions in the Northeast or in the West, and these pillar institutions, but are not looking beyond these institutions to see how can they better diversify their workforce. So these state and federal policy pushes would be really critical in terms of trying to replicate this work. And lastly, I would like to point out that while STEM is really good for our workforce and absolutely critical for our future workforce, I think STEM is important for our nation and for what we want for our country in terms of the need for critical thinkers. We want people to be thinking, inquiry-minded people. We want people to understand that they can go to an election booth and read a ballot and really understand it, but also be able to parse out what that actually means to them, what's going to mean to their community. So that STEM's mindset is really important for, yes, it's important for workforce, but it's also important for our nation at large. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andres. And thank you to the entire panel, Horacio Gutierrez, Antonio Tijerino, Gabriel Montaño, and Andres Enriquez. Excelencia in Education firmly believes that a country's most precious resource is its human resource. And all of you underscored direct on-ramps in your profession, in your work, in your studies, to the bright spots that this analysis has raised up. At this point in our process of releasing this analysis, it is really with enthusiasm that we are anticipating a response by the public. I will turn things over to David to begin the conversation as it relates to this webinar, but really as I close my responsibilities on the webinar, one of the things that as a team we always ask ourselves, ¿y qué? So it is great that we have underscored that there has been an increase in the participation in STEM disciplines, but it is against the backdrop of the potential and the raw talent of the Latino community, the magnitude of the Latino population in America, and the capacity that we have to capture it and really bring it in to function and thrive in our society. At this point, I'll turn things over to David and look forward to a rigorous discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita. And we have a number of questions that people have entered in writing. And I'm going to offer Matt Dembicki from Community College Times the first question. And Matt asks, it seems there's been some downplaying of the value of an associate degree. Can you talk a little bit about the good part of increases in those degrees, especially as stepping stones to a four-year degree? And Deborah, I'm going to ask you to start with that, and then Deborah, as we go, if you could kick the questions to the appropriate panelists, that would be fantastic. And I'll just remind our panelists to please control your own mute for the purpose of discussion if you want to open your mic right now, and then we can have an open discussion in response to the questions. That will be terrific.
Great. Thank you, David, and thank you all for the questions from Community College Times. So maybe I'm going to move the presentation up a little bit so you can see the data again on that section. So I apologize if I'm going fast here. To our colleagues who asked about the associate level, you know, I think one of the reasons we wanted to focus on what works for Latinos in STEM was to focus on this issue of pathway. I think in my comments I noted that it's really important. We know that so many Latinos overall started community college, and a pathway that's a little bit more diverse and that looks at multiple entry points is essential if we're going to get to the workforce and the education of our society in the manner that we need it to. So my intent was not to undermine the value of an associate degree, but merely to note that if we want to scaffold, so that's not necessarily the end point. In part because as we tie it to salary and income, we know that there are good positions available at the associate level, but that in order to increase in the salary range and where we are, that it requires more baccalaureate degree, a graduate degree. And so part of our push in the STEM pathways is to focus on the ability to reach out to these institutions that are graduating students at the certificate and associate level and making sure that they continue in their academic preparation and or that they enter the workforce, but then have scaffolding that allows them to get the academic training they need to continue in their chosen profession or areas of interest. So that's the way we look at it, is not to denigrate any level. That's why we included certificates. We actually included all institutional degree attainment. We didn't separate for-profit from not, because we want to get an accurate picture of where Latino students are and where they're graduating from.
And Deborah, our next question comes from Henry Fernandez from College Complete America. And Henry asks, he says, it would be helpful to know which institutions have the best on-time and 150% time graduation rates in STEM, and wants to know if you have any information on Latino enrollment and graduation rates for the institutions cited in the report.
So thank you, Henry. We did not include graduation rates by institutions in this report. Those data are available to suss out. Our purpose for this piece, so I don't negate that there's value in taking a look at graduation rates. It speaks to the efficiency of student productivity of institutions. I've seen other reports that have some of that out there. For us, we purposely took an approach that looked at numbers of degrees awarded and earned. And for us, this is in part because we are looking at employers and institutions looking to recruit and finding their workforce. And it was a little bit less about the institutional productivity or efficiency in graduating students. So it's not in this publication, but it's an important piece to consider. We're really trying to keep this down in terms of the amount of information, but we could, there's a companion piece to this that could be supported. So,
Deborah, Gloria Fukua from Louisville Forward would like to know if we have any idea why Latinos are more likely to be employed in service roles rather than in professional STEM roles, and also what recommendations do we offer to shift this imbalance?
Sure. So let me see if I can just put that up in front of people here. I'm sorry, I'm going quickly, but just to be able to respond to the question here. So maybe I'll start, and maybe my colleagues might have some input, so I'll try to be short in hopes that someone else might be able to respond. I think in reference to some of the things that were raised, I think Andres mentioned it as well. Some of it is awareness of the opportunities. So two. One is, if the majority of us are getting degrees at between the undergraduate level, certificate, associate, baccalaureate, those are degrees that are essential for service fields. You can get some of them with an associate degree. For many of them in STEM, you need at least an undergraduate degree, and that's going to provide eligibility in terms of academic preparation for service fields. These engineering technicians and such. But to get in the professional field, you need to be more at the graduate level. And so first, when you see the representation in a given year of completion at graduate level, you see that the numbers for Latinos are much smaller. and so the academic preparation for professional fields is much lower. The second is the awareness of these professional fields and the pathway. And I purposely say pathway and not pipeline because I want to reinforce the kind of approach that you have diverse ways of entering and that you've got a broader section. Sometimes it requires students coming back from years in the field to get further education. And it's not just a pipeline that's continuous, it's a pathway of continuation. So if they're not aware of what's needed to get into professional fields, and if you look at the numbers in the workforce, we're not, our role models aren't in the professional fields, then it's probably, those are probably two reasons why you see we're more likely to be in the service sector than not. Now I know my colleague at SACNAS had shared a perspective, and they are working hard to make sure that Latinos are continuing on. So maybe could I suggest, Gabriel, are you interested, Gabriel, in responding to this?
Sure, and thank you. I think these are wonderful questions, by the way, and I think there's a lot of synergy amongst even the questions. And I think you start off with an important statement, and by no means do any of us mean to emphasize that there is something wrong with obtaining an associate's degree or certificate or going to a community college. For example, within SACNAS, we have an expansive group of community colleges and tribal colleges that are part of SACNAS, because we see this as the most likely pathway to pursue advanced degrees amongst our populations. These are the natural entry points for the pathway, as Sarita mentioned. So they must be embraced. The key here is that we need to find out why those tend to be, to any degree, the end point. While we see the advancement of a degree playing a role downstream, we want to make sure that these students then are provided the opportunities to transition onto either four-year institutions or onto advanced degrees as much as possible. And I think Sarita hit the nail on the head. It's about where the ceiling is, and we find that in the STEM professions, depending on what you want to do, it often is necessary to have an advanced degree of a master's level or higher, and particularly in many of the STEM research professions, and these are often the higher paying positions. And when we talk about diversifying the workforce, again, I come back to that as being a key, that while we should celebrate and embrace the fact that we have made some advancements in the workforce, I don't think we want to be satisfied with that. We need to see that type of diversification extend far beyond just the entry-level workforce into positions of leadership, and that will only happen by seeing these types of advanced degrees take shape.
David?
Deborah, Christopher Barker from Miami-Dade College has a question for Horacio Gutierrez. Horacio, Chris asks, you mentioned there's a large number of technology positions that you can't fill. What qualifications is Microsoft looking for in terms of education, experience, and skills that are difficult to find from U.S. graduates?
Well, Microsoft is sort of a large, diversified companies. We have positions that are available for people in many fields of STEM. Computer science and engineering fields are obviously some of the most important ones, but we have a growing hardware business. We are doing a number of things in the area of research and development. We have one of the largest R&D budgets of any company in the industry around the world. So I would say most disciplines in the STEM field are relevant to the things we do, and we are constantly in the search for talent in those areas. But clearly computer science, software development, data analytics, those are areas that are heavy math and science based, in which we have, I would say, the highest need for positions. And at any point in time, people can go to our career site in Microsoft.com and see the variety of positions that we have available around the United States, as well as in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Horacio. And we actually have a related question from Jennifer Vasquez from SHPE. And she asks, what is the business case for companies to invest in Latinos in STEM? So Horacio, perhaps we could start with you and then see if others want to answer.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm I love to tackle it. I get asked this question a lot, and the answer is actually, I think, quite logical. As a company, our products are designed for and sold all over the world. We have, technology products, software that is used by people of every socioeconomic status, of people in professional and educational and nonprofit areas. Our customer base is incredibly diverse, and unless you have people that are designing those products, that are conceiving those products, and then are executing it with a diverse, inclusive perspective, you are really going to miss the mark and be unable to tap into the market opportunities that exist out there. When you design a product, there's significant marketing research that proves that certain features that appeal to the male population don't appeal to the female population. There are different scenarios in which people use it based on what their occupation is. And if we were to hire and would allow a homogeneous workforce in the design and engineering sides, as well as in the marketing of our products, then I think we would be limiting ourselves. So this is why I always like to say that diversity in our workforce is not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do from a business perspective. There are clear economic and market opportunity reasons why companies like Microsoft want and desire a diverse workforce.
Tony, could I ask you to build on that? You said you were recently in Silicon Valley and with students, and is there any additional ways that you tried to make the case when you spoke to them?
Thank you. I think, first of all, the 500 that registered that were all computer science majors or were professionals as computer engineers, it was half and half of the 500. So half were students, half were professionals, and 40% were female. And again, it wasn't even that hard. I think one of the things is just some of what Horacio said, which I appreciate, is that you have to have cultural relevancy, and companies are smart enough to know that you have to connect in terms of content, in terms of what you're creating. But I think there's also just the desperation of the numbers. As I said earlier, that you don't have any choice, and unless they raise the cap on the H-1B visas, you're going to have to exhaust every opportunity you have in the United States. And I think that's where the great work of Satnas and others, and that a lot of folks are doing, is to be able to present a value proposition through our immigrant communities, even recent immigrants, to be able to tap into that talent pool. But it definitely has to be worked all the way through in a consistent level, from K through 12 to college, as you're doing, through grad school, and then mentoring and connecting with people. I'll give you the example of what we do with ExxonMobil, where they have received 250 engineers from us over the last 6 years. And there isn't a conference they had to go to, or they just tell us what the criteria is that they need. And we're able to supply those because we have a network of 150,000 that we choose from, and they're specifically in engineering. What I don't like is this idea that I think exists, where you have to compromise when you're diversifying. And I think our job is to present better talent than they would ever imagine, in order for them to say, where can we get another Horacio, instead of, well, it was the right thing to do. This has to all be about a value proposition in terms of diversity. And the last thing is, when looking at diversity with some of these companies and the public sector, which I think is even worse than the private sector. We have to be able to measure outcomes. That's something you're really good at, Sarita and Deborah. Normally, I think it's very convenient to measure tactics. Who did you meet with? What conversations did you have? What conferences did you attend? No, instead of the actual outcome in terms of what is your plan and what are the numbers going to look like once you get done with this particular plan, and put everyone on the hook in terms of making those numbers move, because companies aren't going to be able to survive. The same thing with every other industry, not just in STEM, if the Latino community isn't involved. Right now, 25% of all of our students are Latino in the country, and it's going to be 30% real soon. So I don't think America has a choice but to really lean on the Latino community, and we're ready for that challenge.
Thank you, Tony. David?
Deborah, we have time for 2 more questions, and the next question comes from Jonathan Hoster, who oversees undergraduate recruitment for Syracuse University's College of Engineering and Computer Science. And he asks a very focused question: what do you suggest he can do to connect with more Latino and Latina high school students who are interested in STEM college majors and careers?
Well, I can certainly respond to that, but I think also Gabriel and SACNAS are doing some of that, so I'll be very short, and maybe Gabriel will give you time to kick in as well. I think, part of the reason we put this entire piece together, acknowledging it doesn't capture all fields and all areas of interest, is we wanted there to be a starting point for those in graduate education as well to know where Latinos are. We often have found that too often we wait for others to find us, and I appreciate the question, especially given the role Syracuse plays nationally in education, because it's so important to say, maybe as a starting point, look at where Latinos are graduating at the undergraduate level and consider whether your outreach strategies include any of those 25, the top 25 graduating Latinos at the undergraduate certificate level, and maybe even the certificate level. That's first. And seeing, are there ways that you can conduct outreach or partnerships with them in order to get them into your pipeline at the graduate level? Second, we've seen, while there is an increase in aspiration for Latino students in STEM fields, and that was, we found that Sylvia Hurtado did some good work looking at aspiration, and we are looking at actualization, or they're getting done. I think the challenge is, are we putting support structures in place, sometimes at the undergraduate level, to make sure that our students who have aspirations of a STEM degree are actually being supported to see it through. And we have found, we put some good examples in the publication that I hope you all will take a look at, of what they're doing for recruitment and support. Hopefully you'll refer to them, but we see that in many of these hard disciplines, these science fields, the focus is often on the discipline and the academic training, which is important, but less focus on support services and strategies to make sure that the students who enroll and are focused on STEM get the support they need to persist and complete. So looking at ways that even within Syracuse, if you have students at the undergraduate level, can get that support is important. Those are just 2. Gabriel, do you have others that your members are doing?
I think you hit upon really the key points, and I'll just expand upon those a bit within SACNAS, what we do. And you're absolutely right. One of the first things is within the outreach, and I think a nice thing about technology is that it has made the world smaller, in that I don't think that universities now have to do all the work on their own within a bubble. And so there are societies like SACNAS and many of our sister societies that do a wonderful job of identifying students, and they're great places to go and to meet the best students out there, and not just the best minority students. These are amongst the best students in the country, and they're ready for your institutions. And so I'd encourage working with organizations and such as ourselves and others that have invested already in these efforts. The second part is critical that you mentioned, Sarita, which is the support structure. It's not surprising that we see most of our graduates coming from regional institutions in which there are large numbers of Latinos. There they have a built-in infrastructure to help support them through the process. It must be understood at our higher education institutions that many of the students coming in from a minority background, many Latinos coming in, are first-generation collegiate students. They do not have that support group at home to be able to ask questions. And there are many places along the pathway where potholes pop up. And any one of those can take out a promising student that has the potential moving forward. And so it's important that you invest in infrastructures. One way that we've managed to do that within SACNAS is we have over 100 chapters that are across the country. Almost all of them are at universities. That these help to provide two things. One is that they provide a place for commonality and cultural commonality. So our students have some place where folks like themselves can identify, and they can be nurtured and cultured through the process, so that when these potholes do pop up, that they're able to avert them. The second thing it does is it allows for a group of individuals to outreach into the community and to help also with that K through 12 infrastructure and helping to develop and build those types of identifications within the community as STEM being a career, as was mentioned by my colleagues on this webinar as well, as being very important, introducing those careers, making them look like real people. It's so important for individuals to see somebody that looks like them doing that type of job. And so by identifying those types of students and providing that infrastructure, it'll go a long way, I think, in helping you achieve your goals, particularly when for institutions that are not in a hotbed of demographics when it comes to the Latino community.
David, I know we probably don't have time for many more, but I would want to note, building on what Gabriel said, in addition to SACNAS, there's SHIP, MISE, Great Minds, Hispanic Heritage Foundation has this project called Loft. And there are lots of community-based organizations and nonprofit organizations that you can work with. We're happy to put a list together and share that with you if you reach out to us. We've been collaborating and learning from them as well.
Deborah, I think that brings us to the end of our time. This has really been a terrific discussion, but out of respect for everyone's time, we're at 2 minutes past the hour, and so it seems like appropriate to wrap up. But if we didn't get to your question, and we do have a very long list of questions people have entered into the system, which is great because it means that people are really engaged in this discussion. We have these questions through the webinar system, and we can certainly follow up with you. And just as a reminder, we will be sending out to all of you an email that includes the brief itself, the infographic, as well as a recording of this webinar. But you can also, through the webinar system, download the slides that Deborah has been using, as well as the other information we've been discussing. So now I'm going to pass it back to Deborah to offer some closing thoughts.
I want to say thank you all for taking the time and learning a little bit about what we know about Latinos in STEM. I hope that you will continue to engage. We hope this is an important framing for you to consider the work you all are doing and what can be done. And if we can be helpful in helping you partner with others who are doing this good work, please count on Excelencia to be an information source and a partner with you going forward. Thank you.